It's an unusual case. Lacey Spears, a Rockland County mother, charged with murdering her son by poisoning him with salt.
It's probably the worst nightmare for anyone working in a hospital. A small child is brought in with mysterious symptoms. Doctors and nurses do everything they can to stabilize the child, but nothing helps. The child dies. But what if this terrible story doesn't end here? What if there are reasons for the child's death that are darker than anyone could imagine? On January 17, 2014, Lacey Spears calls a friend crying. She is at home with her little son Garnet, and she is sure Garnet is having epileptic seizures. Her friend rushes over to Lacey's house. When she arrives, she sees that 5-year-old Garnet really does seem very sick. The boy has always had health problems, but now he sits pale on the couch. Next to him, his feeding tube. Lacey's friend agrees. Garnet needs medical help immediately. Together, they take him to the nearby Nyack Hospital. There, Lacey tells the doctors that her son has had 3 seizures in just a few minutes. The doctors immediately do an EEG, but they find nothing unusual. Still, Garnet is very unwell. He complains of headaches, has diarrhea, and vomits. At some point, the symptoms that Lacey thought were seizures start again, but the EEG remains normal. Instead, the test shows that Garnet's brain activity is slowing down. This alarms the doctors. Garnet can no longer breathe on his own, and his sodium and chloride levels are dangerously high. 2 days later, the staff at Nyack Hospital realize they need specialists for this case. A helicopter flies the little boy to Westchester. There, he is admitted to the intensive care unit at Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. Even though specialists are taking care of his treatment, the boy's condition keeps getting worse. On January 22nd, 5 days after being admitted, Garnet suffers a brain swelling and a brainstem stroke. Shortly after, little Garnet Spears is declared brain dead. The next day, he passes away.
What is your favorite memory of him?
Wow. I miss that he would wake me up during the middle of the night just to talk to me, just to tell me that he loved me, just so that we could read books or to play in the middle of our living room floor. I just miss spending time with him. I was with him and he was with me all the time, and I miss that. I miss just being able to pick him up and hug him and kiss him and tell him I love him. I miss everything about him, everything.
But what is behind these strange symptoms? Why did Garnet Spears have to die? Unfortunately, the doctors couldn't save the boy. However, the medical team at the first hospital did something that would later make them take a much closer look at his death. Since the EEG had been normal at first, the doctors placed a camera in Garnet's room to record any possible seizures. This resulted in about 42 hours of video footage. When the footage is reviewed as part of routine checks, something stands out. When Garnet first arrives at the hospital, his condition seems to improve a little. Overnight, he stabilizes, and by the next morning, he actually seems to be doing relatively well. Then he goes to the bathroom with his mother. Lacey is carrying a piece for Garnet's gastric tube and a white cup. When Garnet comes out of the bathroom, his condition suddenly worsens. He starts vomiting and has severe diarrhea. Then he gets a bit better, until Lacey and he go to the bathroom again. Shortly after, his condition dramatically worsens once more. And again, Lacey had the tube piece and that white cup with her when they went inside. Then, there are those unexplained sodium and chloride levels. A doctor at the Nyack Hospital puts the pieces together. He suspects that Garnet Spears was given a lethal amount of salt through his feeding tube. That would explain the unusual blood values and his extreme symptoms. Right after going to the bathroom with his mother. And yeah, guys, this case gets even worse. The doctor contacts his colleagues at the second hospital. They all agree. While they are still fighting to save Garnett's life, they call the police. The doctors now suspect that Garnett's mother Lacey is behind it all. The police launch an investigation. Of course, this cannot bring Garnett back, but over time it becomes clear that this is not just a case of a sick child. It is a murder case. Lacey had arranged for Garnett to have a feeding tube placed when he was just an infant, so he could be fed liquids. When Garnett reached kindergarten age, one of his doctors questioned whether the feeding tube was still necessary. But Lacey never had it removed, even though Garnett could eat normally. When he was at friends' houses or had snacks at kindergarten, he ate regular meals like any other child. But at home, his mother Lacey fed him only through the tube. Even as a baby, Garnett had been hospitalized due to unusual sodium levels. The cause was never found. Over the years, Lacey and Garnett moved several times, which meant she was always seeing new doctors, who only knew Garnett's medical history based on what Lacey told them. When he was 3, they moved to a community called Fellowship near New York. This was a project where younger residents and families lived together with senior citizens. The seniors received help with daily tasks, and in exchange, the younger residents could live there for free. Food, as well as kindergarten and school for the children, was also covered. Lacey devoted herself to taking care of the seniors, and in return, they adored little Garnett. Lacey told everyone about his severe health problems, but to them, he seemed like a normal, active child. One of the senior residents at Fellowship received a call from Lacey when Garnett was dying. By then, Lacey already knew that the police were involved and that her son was brain dead. She told her Fellowship neighbor about it on the phone, but then she made a request. She asked the senior woman to go into Lacey's apartment and throw away the feeding tube bag that was hanging there. At the time, the request seemed odd. Now it is clear, this was likely Lacey's attempt to destroy the evidence. Throughout Garnett's childhood, Lacey had taken him to numerous doctors and hospitals, repeatedly telling new medical professionals about diagnoses that had already been proven false. Just a few days before Garnett was hospitalized in January 2014, Lacey had searched online for terms like normal sodium levels for a child and dangers of high sodium levels in a child. When police searched Lacey's apartment, they found exactly what the doctor had suspected: 2 large open containers of salt and 2 feeding tube attachments with high salt residue. In other words, Lacey Spears poisoned her own child. But why? Hey guys, huge thanks for your amazing support over the past few weeks. We're slowly becoming a community. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for everything. Now, on to the shocking case.
I took him to the hospital for help. If I had wanted to harm him, why would I take him to a hospital? Seeking help. I didn't kill my son. I wanted to know what was going on with him because he was in pain and he was suffering and he was hurting and nobody could explain to me what was going on.
Lacey had Garnett when she was 20 years old. His father, Chris Hill, was her neighbor at the time. The two were not in a serious relationship, but had more of a casual connection. Still, for Lacey, it was always clear that she wanted to keep the baby and raise him on her own. She had previously worked as a babysitter to earn extra money, and later worked in a kindergarten. She always formed very close bonds with the children she cared for and their families, sometimes too close for some parents' comfort. Some felt that she was interfering too much in their family lives. This case has been linked to Munchausen by proxy syndrome. You might also know it as factitious disorder imposed on another, FDIA. This is a mental disorder in which a person deliberately causes or fabricates symptoms or illnesses in someone else. Most often, this happens in a parent-child relationship. In this case, Lacey suffered from Munchausen by proxy and pretended that her son Garnett was sick. She went so far that Garnett died because of her deception. She had intentionally made him ill and invented symptoms he never actually had. There is still limited research on the causes of this syndrome. However, experts believe it is often linked to unresolved psychological issues, especially low self-esteem or a history of abuse. Diagnosing and detecting this disorder is extremely difficult. Many people with Munchausen by proxy remain undiscovered for years. They plan their victims' fake medical histories so carefully that it can take a long time before anyone realizes the truth, if they ever do. The name comes from a German baron, Baron von Munchausen, who became famous in the 18th century for telling highly exaggerated and fictional stories. The US healthcare system has certain loopholes that make Munchausen by proxy cases harder to catch. Due to US laws, doctors cannot access a child's medical records from other physicians without parental consent. This makes it easier for parents to lie about their child's health and to receive unnecessary medical treatments without raising suspicion. The problem is, parents with this disorder believe, at least in their own distorted way, that they're doing nothing wrong. To this day, Lacey Spears insists that she does not have Munchausen by proxy syndrome. She also claims that she never put salt into the feeding tube attachments. When she later goes to trial, her lawyer argues that the IV infusion Garnett received at the hospital also contained sodium. That is technically true. However, the containers found in Lacey's home contained the equivalent of 60 small salt packets, far more than any hospital infusion would ever have. Still, the defense argues that Garnett ultimately died due to inadequate medical care, and that Lacey is being unfairly blamed for everything. But the evidence tells a different story. Lacey also lied about other things. She once claimed that Garnett's father was not Chris Hill, but a police officer named Blake. According to her, Blake had tragically died in the line of duty. On social media, Lacey even posted tributes about Blake's supposed funeral and how much she misses him. By the way, this police officer named Blake actually exists, but he is very much alive and still on duty today. He had met Lacey 2 or 3 times about 10 years earlier. It was only through the investigation into Lacey that he learned she had been falsely claiming for years that he was the father of her son. There were red flags in Garnett's medical records from the very beginning. When he was just 5 weeks old, a doctor had already noted in his files a suspicion that Lacey Spears might have Munchausen by proxy syndrome. However, every time her stories stopped making sense, Lacey would simply switch doctors. And that's how she was able to continue for years, until she finally killed her son at just 5 years old.
He had a right to grow up and a right to grow old, and she stole that from him. She committed the ultimate betrayal that a mother can do. She was supposed to love him, nurture him, care for him, and protect him. And she did the complete opposite, and she killed him.
This was not a spontaneous or ill-conceived solitary act. It was a series of planned and orchestrated actions that really shocked the conscience. Instead of nurturing and protecting a beautiful child, you subjected him to 5 years of torment and pain. One does not have to be a psychologist to realize you suffer from a mental illness, known as Munchausen by proxy. I hope you over the next few years come to terms with your condition and are receptive to any treatment that may be available to you. By not imposing the maximum sentence, I'm combining punishment with something that you really did not exhibit towards your son, namely mercy. By not imposing the maximum sentence, I in no way mean to diminish the life of Garnett, which is precious and beyond value. How could a mother ever treat her innocent child in such a callous, inhumane, and calculating manner? Do you even realize the magnitude of your crime? Why didn't you seek help at some point?
Lacey Spears was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole no earlier than June 2034 and remains behind bars to this day. Lacey also claims that she was never diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy by any psychiatrist. She insists that she is completely healthy and that she is wrongfully imprisoned. However, the court ruled that Lacey did have the syndrome and that this was ultimately the reason her son died. The most well-known Munchausen by proxy case is Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a case where a video will probably follow soon, if you want to. Let me know in the comments if a deep dive into this case would be interesting to you, or if there's another case you'd like me to revisit. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and look forward to your suggestions. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Any support really helps a lot. In some cases, however, the child is pure evil. In this case, a 14-year-old kills her own mother. The reasons and the course of events will shock you. Click on the video. Until then, stay safe.